the Gypsy Rose Blanchard controversy. She's become a popular online influencer after her mom basically had Munchausen syndrome by proxy and treated her for years as a sufferer of leukemia, muscular dystrophy, etc. If you remember the Hulu miniseries, The Act, with Joey King and Patricia Arquette, that's what that series was all about. And then eventually, Gypsy Rose had a boyfriend, and she had her boyfriend. And she ended up doing 8 years in prison. And meanwhile, her boyfriend got life in prison. So she was released from prison. And her social media following is now up to 8.3 million, and she has now been on Good Morning America. She was with the ladies on The View. Again, this is a perfect encapsulation of what our society is. Anybody who was at any point a victim becomes a hero. That's the way this works. Victimhood, heroism, the same thing. Now,
all right. Ben Shapiro is right. Society is sick. You know, Gypsy Rose came out of jail and it was straight to The View. I mean, who gets out of jail and then like a week later, they're like getting primped up and ready to go to The View, Good Morning America, everything else. They're like, society just loves the salacious everything. But the problem is we are feeding into Gypsy Rose's borderline personality disorder. Okay. Yes. All right. Allegedly, in my opinion. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. So Ben Shapiro is going to go through this situation. He breaks it down really good because he talks so fast. So, and we're going to go through it with him. We're going to react to some of the things that he said, some of the things to think about when it comes to Gypsy Rose. Again, we want to wish Gypsy a good and healthy, prosperous life. I mean, you're outside, you're back in society. I would want the best for you because I want the best for society. Right. So we wish that for Gypsy, but there's things to look out for. And borderline personality disorder is, to me, a side effect of Munchausen by proxy as far as for the victim. We're going to get into that. All right. But in the meantime, guys, if you happen to like the video, don't forget to hit the like button. Thank you so much.
there is the legal issue, which is after years from her mother. So what's unclear to me in this particular case is why she pled guilty. She pled guilty to a second-degree murder charge. Now, it was clearly first-degree murder in the sense that it was premeditated. So by all available evidence, she was working with her then-boyfriend to her mother. Like, she was texting with him. She apparently let him into the house where her mom was murdered, provided him with the goods to do the murder, including the knife. He said that afterward they had sex. She said afterward that he raped her.
I'm filming this.
The person who did the guy named Nicholas Godejohn, he apparently reported an IQ of 82, suggested there was some impairment. He had a history of indecent exposure and a history of mental illness. Apparently they met on a Christian singles website. He sometimes reported dissociative identity disorder and autism spectrum disorder. She let him in the house. He killed mom. This is after mom had spent years abusing her, pulling out her teeth, undernourishing her, treating her as a child even though she was an adult, and all the rest of this. And then she pled guilty to second-degree murder. She, as we say, received some years in jail, and he received life in prison. Was she guilty of first-degree murder? Yes. Were there extenuating circumstances? Also yes, which is probably why she pled guilty to the second-degree murder. That was the plea deal that was offered to her. Maybe prosecutors felt that if they went for first degree, she'd get acquitted. She felt that if she actually went to trial, maybe she would get convicted, and so she didn't want to spend more time in jail, so they settled the thing out, and she did some years in jail, and now she's out. As far as her boyfriend, the question is why he received such a disparate sentence from her. She's the one who convinced him to do the murder. Now, number one, he wasn't the one who was actively victimized, right? It was she who was victimized by her mom, so it's possible that the court viewed that differently. They looked at him and they saw somebody who may have been quasi-sociopathic, somebody who was violent, somebody who was in fact a murderer, and who might not have restricted his murderous activities to just this girl's mom.
All right, so Ben goes through explaining like the criminal aspect of it, you know, going to jail and the court system and everything. He does explain this trial, this case very well in detail, and he's right. A lot of us think, especially myself, and actually I'm catching myself where I felt like, dag, like, why does he have to be in jail for the rest of his life? Like, why can't he get out in 10 years? But he's right. He's like, that's not the question. He should be in jail longer. He should be in jail for life, because we don't know that this is just isolated to this situation for him, like where he would have did something like this just for this situation. He's right. Because this person obviously proved that they couldn't make a sound decision of saying, hey, you know what, why don't we just call the cops instead? So what happens if the next person comes to him and says, hey, guess what? My pops have kind of been, you know what I mean? He's not letting me borrow the car, you know? So I think it's time to like take care of that, right? So saying it like that does make sense to me. But what Ben is saying is we should ask why Gypsy isn't still in jail, because since she conspired this too, because she also didn't say, you want to know what? Let me just go ahead and call the cops. And I know for a lot of people listening, that you might think like, well, I mean, she tried to run away before and nobody would help her or whatever. But at the point where you're in a community where now everybody knows you and they think you can't walk, I'm pretty sure if you walked into the sheriff's department, walked into the police station of the community that thinks you can't walk and said, my mom's been doing not right things to me and I'm here to report it, help me. Immediately they would pay attention to what you were saying. Because remember, the press conference, the sheriff starts off with, things aren't always what they seem. After they ended the mom, you hear in the video, they're laughing.
What's weird here, though, is Gypsy's response to all of this. So Gypsy was asked if it was fair that her ex-boyfriend got life in prison while she gets to live free. And her response is sort of weird, unless you actually believe that she, quasi-manipulated him into the murder. The actual response makes sense. Like, if you actually thought that he was doing an altruistic thing in helping you get out from under the mom, then presumably you'd want to stand up for him. But she doesn't stand up for him. Instead, she's like, okay, she kind of knew this was a violent guy, and she wanted her mom murdered, the ability to do it herself. So here she was asked the question.
Is it fair that he is incarcerated for life for killing your mom and you're out?
Well, I'm sure that we both have a lot of regrets. All I can really say is that I did my time. He's doing his time for his part. And I wish him well on his journey.
I wish him well on his journey. His journey is going to involve being in prison the rest of his life. It's not the world's best journey.
So it's funny how Gypsy, like this part right here, when she says, I wish him well, so like, you know what I mean? Like, I wish him well, in his journey. There is no journey. That man is locked up in a jail cell. You the one who has the journey now. And she doesn't stand up for him. She doesn't talk about it. And it's almost with a slight undertone of indignant, like, I did my time. It is what it is. You know what I mean? Like, don't ask me again. But she's not going to say that. She's going to answer the questions. She's not going to say that.
So Joy Behar, who of course has no moral gradations whatsoever, talked to Gypsy about whether this was moral or not.
Please listen to me. Heed my words that you are not alone in this, situation. There are other ways out. I did it the wrong way.
No. Don't say that.
But I did.
No choice,
I did
really.
something wrong, and I paid my dues for it.
Oh, you mean that part?
Yes, the part of it.
Yeah.
That part of it. Yeah.
Where are you going with this?
Yeah. No. So I did something.
And the fact that she has to be corrected by, the murder. Joy Behar, all the moral compass of a penguin. So Gypsy also says that she forgave her mother and blames mental illness for the abuse. Again, all of that may be true. Also, that's why you call the cops, typically.
Your mom has been portrayed as a monster.
I don't believe my mother was a monster. She had a lot of demons herself that she was struggling with. I didn't want her dead. I just wanted out of my situation. And I thought that was the only way out.
All right, so let's go through this whole clip here. First of all, The View, I just can't stand them on The View. Let me just say that and get that out the way. Now, Gypsy Rose has to let Joy Behar know, yeah, I did end somebody. They just love it so much. They just love the salacious story. They're like vultures for anything negative, right? Like, oh, well, you didn't do anything wrong. Well, yeah, that's murder. Like, what kind of despotic society are we in where we laugh about things like that? I'm not saying shame her. Y'all already have her there. When we get back to Gypsy saying she didn't extremely dislike her mom, these words I'm not going to use. I don't know that I believe Gypsy with that, because y'all were laughing after she was ended in such a bloody fashion. So there was an excitement there that has to be derived from extreme dislike. And it's okay if you dislike her. I mean, she really did do something to you, so you have a right to dislike her.
Was her mom a monster? I mean, two things can be true at once. One, mental illness does make people into monsters. It can. Does that mean the person is fully in control over their actions when they're mentally ill? Not necessarily. Does it mean that they're not monstrous? No, actually, you can be both. You can be both mentally ill and monstrous.
Now, when we get into this discussion about, My mom had mental health issues. Everybody calls these things mental health. I'm sorry. I'm from the old school. Now, dig this. I understand these emotions and these thoughts come from the mind. So therefore it is mental. But I think it minimizes actual mental health diagnoses such as schizophrenia, schizoaffective, disassociating, going catatonic, like real chemical imbalances where people are hallucinating, hearing things. To me, that's more of a person who's mentally sick. For me, Munchausen by proxy is a behavioral disorder, if you will, but you know right from wrong. You know right from wrong because you know how to hide the wrong that you're doing. Once you know that you're doing something wrong that you need to hide, you have the mental capacity to know that you're doing something wrong. So therefore, it is not, to me, a mental sickness per se. Like somebody with schizophrenia, they might start yelling or trying to fight something, some random thing, and you don't see what they're trying to fight, but they're hallucinating, right? So just randomly out of nowhere, they just start screaming and yelling. But they don't know that they're doing something wrong that's a little awkward in society, right? They're just reacting. Yes, there's a serious imbalance. But Munchausen by proxy, again, you go through a lot to make sure everybody believes you, but you know you're lying. You get a whiff of that need for attention when your child is actually sick. With Gypsy Rose's situation, Gypsy really did have striasis where her eyes were almost like going inward. And, she needed to have some sort of surgery, and everybody, rallied around Dee Dee. And they say that Dee Dee got a whiff of that feeling of all the attention and everything, that now it was like, okay, I got to always keep her sick to get this attention. But why do you need that attention? You need that attention to feel validated because something in your life made you not feel validated when you were younger. So you need other people to affirm your existence. Okay, so we got to the root cause, but you still know you're doing something wrong. And so if you know you're doing something wrong, you should say, get this child away from me because I'm going to hurt this child. Borderline personality disorder is a mental illness. We go again with this mental illness that severely impacts a person's ability to manage their emotions. Really think about that. Okay. The loss of emotional control can increase impulsivity, affect how a person feels about themselves, and negatively impact their relationships with others. What does that sound like? A mental health disorder, like a mental health illness, or does it sound like a behavioral problem? We're managing behavioral health now with medication, but we're not really teaching proper coping skills. So let's get back to this. Now, why do I think that Gypsy has borderline personality disorder? Why wouldn't she? I mean, she has every trigger for it. I mean, root cause. Her mother treated her. Her mother already showed her a fractured relationship. And that was her main relationship for the longest time, was her mom. And her mom was giving her a broken relationship, which is now the source of not knowing how to deal with problems or even get acceptance from people. Gypsy had to perform for her mother. When the mom had the camera on, they would be in the house and the mom would have the camera on, and she would still have to smile and play around and stuff like that. And it's still acceptance for the mother performing, right? Okay. Then Gypsy, of course, had to perform for society. Even when they took out Gypsy's salivary glands, she still had to perform for society and put on a smile. That takes a lot of training. And so now who are you? Who are you, right? And so fast forward to today, Gypsy's out of jail and Gypsy's in front of the cameras. And Gypsy has over 14 million followers on these sites and everything. And it's dopamine hit, dopamine hit, dopamine hit. Social media is the worst thing for somebody with a personality disorder because they crave attention, they crave acceptance. And considering your situation, I'm not saying that you should cower into some corner, but you are seeking attention and you have to be able to keep it at bay.